What if I told you the premium steak in your fridge tonight might be the exact same meat as the cheap 1-2 shelves down, just wearing a fancier costume? Right now, in supermarkets across Australia, shoppers are paying up to $8 more per kilo for a steak that came from the same cow, the same paddock, and the same truck as the budget option. The only real difference is the sticker on the front. Before we go any further, if you care about what's actually on your plate and you're sick of being lied to by clever packaging, do me one small favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and send this video to someone in your family who does the weekly shop. The more people who see this, the harder it gets for these brands to keep playing games with your dinner. And trust me, by the end of this video, you will never look at a steak label the same way again. Now let me tell you why this matters more than you might think. My name isn't the point here. What matters is that I've spent months digging through the actual rules published by Meat and Livestock Australia, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, and Choice, the country's most respected consumer watchdog. Every single claim in this video is backed by a real regulator, a real standard, or a real document. Nothing is guessed, nothing is exaggerated. I'll point to the source as we go so you can check it yourself if you want to. The average Australian household spends between $20 and $40 a week on beef. And when it's steak night, that number climbs fast. A Scotch fillet at Coles or Woolworths can cost you $35 to $45 a kilo. A premium or Wagyu style cut can hit $60, $70, even over $100 a kilo. You're not just buying dinner, you are paying for a promise that the animal was raised well, fed properly, and graded fairly. And in Australia, the gap between what that promise says and what the law actually forces a company to prove is enormous. Before we count down the 8 brands you should walk right past, you need 3 pieces of background. Once you understand these 3 things, every single brand on this list will suddenly make perfect sense. First, the words grass-fed in Australia do not mean what most people picture in their head. According to the Cattle Council of Australia's own pasture-fed standard, cattle can still spend a window of time being finished on grain and legally keep the grass-fed label. That's because Australian consumer law only requires that a claim not be false or misleading. It does not require one single locked-in definition. Picture what this actually looks like in real life. One animal spends its whole life on open pasture, eating only grass and legumes. Another animal grazes for most of its life, then spends its final weeks in a feedlot being fattened on grain to add weight and marbling. Both can legally sit under a grass-fed sticker on the shelf. Nutritionally, they are different products. The fat even behaves differently in a hot pan. But the Food Standards Code does not stamp a hard number on how many days of grain finishing kills the grass-fed claim. That gap is exactly where big supermarket brands live. And it's why 2 completely different steaks can sit side by side, wearing what looks like the same promise. Second, there are 2 totally different grading languages on Australian beef, and supermarkets often show you only the one that makes their products sound better. The first is Meat Standards Australia, or MSA. This is the official eating quality system, built from more than 700,000 real consumer taste tests. It grades cuts from 3 stars to 5 stars, based on how tender, juicy, and flavorful they are for a specific cooking method. The second system is called AUS Meat and Wagyu marbling scores. This measures fat content on a scale from 0 to 9+. Here's the tricky part. A 3-star MSA steak can still carry a low marbling score, and a high marbling score doesn't automatically mean 5-star MSA quality. Brands love printing just one number on the front of the pack and leaving the other one off completely. That's not an accident. That's a choice designed to make you feel like you're getting more than you actually are. Third, and this one should genuinely make you angry, the word Wagyu has almost no enforced meaning in Australian retail. The peak industry body, the Australian Wagyu Association, was forced to create its own trade descriptions based on the percentage of Wagyu genetics in an animal. Why? Because the ACCC actually investigated Wagyu labeling and eventually dropped the case, saying the evidence didn't clearly show a breach of consumer law. Read that again. The regulator looked at the problem and then walked away from it. That means a product can legally say Wagyu beef, while containing just a tiny fraction of Wagyu genetics crossed into an otherwise ordinary commercial breed. Once you know these 3 things, the grass-fed loophole, the 2 grading languages, and the Wagyu gap, you cannot unknow them. And your supermarket has a 0 interest in explaining any of this to you. So let's start the countdown. From number 8, the steak you should quietly put back on the shelf, all the way down to number 1, the worst offender in the entire country. Number 8. Generic, grain-fed, loose tray steak with no MSA star rating anywhere on the label. You pick it up because it's just sitting there in the regular fridge section at a normal price. No fancy branding, no fuss. Looks like any other steak. That's the bait. Here's the hook. If a steak does not carry an MSA star rating, that is not by chance. It's a decision the supplier made. MSA grading is voluntary. A cut without those stars has not been checked against the program's eating quality standards at all. The MSA system itself is not a quick tick box. It looks at more than 40 different inputs across the animal's life and the carcass. Things like age, breed type, rib fat depth, pH, and a marbling measurement. Either the producer paid to put that carcass through the whole pipeline and earned a number, or they didn't, and the meat went to the shelf with nothing attached. Skipping that step saves money. So when you see no stars at all on a steak, the most likely reason is that the cost wasn't worth it for that batch. Not that the beef was so good it didn't need checking. Here's how that plays out at your dinner table. You marinate the steak, you grill it exactly the way the packet says. 1 week it's tender and lovely. The next week, from the same store, it's chewy enough to give your jaw a workout. You blame your cooking. It was never your cooking. It was a carcass that nobody ever measured. An ungraded steak is a steak with no quality guarantee attached. Full price, zero accountability. If the brand actually wanted you to trust the eating experience, they would have paid for the grading and slapped those stars proudly on the front. Number 7, supermarket home brand Wagyu style or Wagyu blend burger patties, plus budget Wagyu steak sitting just a couple of dollars above regular beef. You buy it because seeing the word Wagyu on a $9 pack of patties feels like you've stumbled onto a bargain. That's the bait. Here's the hook. Real Wagyu, even crossbred Wagyu, costs real money to produce. The breeding program is specialized. The feeding period is long. That's why the Australian Wagyu Association created its own trade descriptions in the first place, because so many products were using the name with barely any actual Wagyu genetics. And remember, the ACCC looked at this exact issue and chose not to prosecute. Think about what raising a genuine Wagyu-influenced animal really involves. You need specific genetics traced through a breeding program. You need an extended grain finishing period, often over 100 days longer than standard cattle. You need a feed plan designed to build intramuscular fat, which is that beautiful marbling, not just body weight. None of that is cheap, and none of that magically disappears just because a supermarket wants a cheap product with a fancy word on the label. If a Wagyu product is priced only a fraction above regular mince, the genetics inside are almost certainly a tiny percentage, not a meaningful amount. Real Wagyu costs real money. There is no shortcut. So at dinner, you pay a small premium expecting that buttery, melt-in-your-mouth marbling. What you get is a patty that cooks, tastes, and shrinks exactly like ordinary beef. Because in the end, that's largely what it is. The word is doing the selling. The genetics are not. Number 6, Aldi's standard fresh beef steak range. Not the special premium lines, but the everyday range that's neither PCAS certified nor independently audited. You buy it because Aldi has built a reputation for punching above its weight, and many shoppers assume that reputation covers every single product on the shelf. That's the bait. And to be fair, Aldi's standard beef can absolutely cook up fine. Here's the hook. Aldi has confirmed its fresh meat is 100% sourced from Australian farmers. But unlike Coles' Graze range or Woolworths' Macro range, Aldi's everyday beef does not carry PCS certification. There is no independent third-party audit confirming pasture access, feedlot exclusion, or lifetime traceability for the standard line. Put it next to what we'll cover shortly. Coles built its Graze range around farm-level traceability across more than 180 named properties. Woolworths stacked 3 separate independent certifications onto its Macro range. Aldi's everyday steak carries none of that paperwork. Their public claims lean almost entirely on country of origin, not on feeding standards, welfare, or traceability. That's not automatically a quality problem. But it is an information problem. Because if you're buying it specifically for verified grass-fed, hormone-free, traceable beef, you didn't get a guarantee. You got a guess backed only by Aldi's internal word. Now, before we push deeper into this list, do me one quick favor. If you've ever felt cheated by a food label, if you've ever paid extra for something that turned out to be nothing special, tap that like button right now. Every single like tells the algorithm to push this warning out to more Australian families who genuinely need it. This isn't about hating supermarkets. It's about making sure you never pay a premium price for a budget product again. All right, back to the countdown. Number 5, any steak labeled simply as product of Australia beef, sold loose with a country of origin bar chart and nothing else. No cut name beyond something vague like steak or beef cuts. You buy it because that little kangaroo-style bar chart looks so official. That's the bait. Here's the hook. The country of origin labeling system only requires that little bar chart showing the percentage of Australian ingredients. That's it. It says nothing about the cut, grading, feeding, or welfare. That chart was designed to answer exactly one question. Where did this food come from? But it was never meant to answer how good it's going to taste. quality and welfare run through voluntary programs like MSA and PKS. A pack can be 100% Australian and still be anonymous, unnamed, ungraded trim sold at steak prices. Number 4. Coles and Woolworths unbranded premium or reserve grain-fed house lines sitting between everyday beef and certified ranges. You know the ones. Gold lettering, the word reserve or select printed in a fancy font. A price jump of 20 to 30% over standard. But look closely. No MSA star rating. No marbling score. Nothing measurable printed anywhere. You buy it because everything about that packet screams upgrade. That's the bait. Here's the hook. Premium sounding words are not regulated the way grading claims are. Calling something select is a marketing decision. Under Australian consumer law, a genuine quality claim has to be backed up, but brands can back up a vague word like select far more easily than a specific MSA number. Vague words don't promise anything measurable, and that's the entire point. The ACCC's own inquiry found retailers engage in labeling that makes quality hard to judge. So at dinner, you pay near restaurant prices for what might be a slightly thicker cut of the same beef, sitting one shelf below at a lower price. Number 3. Coles brand and Woolworths brand canned and frozen corned beef. You assume the same Australian promise carries across the whole line. That's the bait. Here's the hook. Industry reporting has confirmed that these house brands are both made using beef sourced from Brazil, not Australia. Meanwhile, a third-party brand called Hamper sells corned beef made in Australia using Australian beef right on the same shelf. When pushed, both companies confirmed their big 100% Australian promise is about the fresh meat counter, not every product with their name. Unless you flip it over and read the small print, you have no reason to suspect the beef inside crossed an ocean to get there. Number 2, any steak marketed as organic without an actual certified organic logo from a recognized body. You buy it because the word sounds like the gold standard, hormone-free and chemical-free. That's the bait. Here's the hook. In Australia, the word organic on its own is not tightly controlled the same way a registered certification logo is. Real certified organic beef goes through actual annual audits, but a product that just prints the word has none of that verification behind it. At dinner, you pay the organic premium, sometimes 30% more, but what you're really paying for is a word, not a guarantee. Number 1, the worst offender. Supermarket Wagyu-style rib fillets sold at only a modest markup over standard Scotch fillet. You buy it because it's the most aspirational item in the fridge that still feels affordable. That's the bait. Here's the hook. Producing real Wagyu costs far more than that small gap could ever reflect. This is a regulatory gray zone, not a clean bill of health. When a steak costs only a few dollars more, the maths doesn't work. There's no way genuine Wagyu genetics are doing the heavy lifting at that price. It exploits a real loophole that a national regulator looked at and chose not to close, right at the price point designed to slip past your common sense. Now stop for a moment. Let's get you 2 quick label checks you can use in the supermarket tonight. Check 1 is the certification hunt. Look for a real, named, recognizable logo like PKS, the MSA star symbol, or the Australian Certified Organic mark. If all you see is a word like premium or Wagyu with no logo, that word is doing marketing work, not certification work. Check 2 is the price gap test. If the fancy claim comes with only a small price gap under 15%, be suspicious. Real certification and real Wagyu genetics cost real money. A big claim with a tiny price gap is the single biggest red flag in the meat aisle. While we're on quick tips, a darker purple color on a vacuum-sealed steak does not mean it's spoiled. It's simply meat without oxygen. Give it 20 minutes and it turns back to red. Trust the use-by date and the certification logos, not folktales. If this video has already saved you money, share it with one person today. Every share protects another household from paying premium prices for budget products. Now let's finally talk about the 3 brands that actually deserve your money. Number 3 of the good guys, Coles' Gray's beef and lamb range. Gray's cattle come from more than 180 farms with lifetime traceability and 0 hormone growth, promotants guaranteed. In the pan, that shows up as consistent grass-fed flavor and cream-colored fat from beta-carotene rather than the pure white of grain finishing. Number 2, Woolworths Macro Grass-Fed Beef Range. This is certified under the Pasture-Fed Cattle Assurance System, an MSA graded for quality. It also carries Livestock Welfare Certified System accreditation. That's 3 separate independent audits stacked on one single product. If you want proof of what you're eating, Macro is genuinely one of the most rigorously verified steaks you can drop in a normal shopping trolley. Number 1, MSA 5-star and 4-star graded cuts, bought from a butcher or supermarket that shows the star rating directly on the label. MSA grading is built from 700,000 real consumer taste tests. A 5-star cut has to clear a measurably higher scientific bar. This isn't marketing, it's a published scoring system. MSA graded cuts often don't cost dramatically more than ungraded versions because quality is built into management. For nationwide access, consistent value, and a rating system that follows the meat instead of the marketing budget, MSA graded cuts are what I would buy. Now here's how you protect yourself. Pick up the pack. Look for an MSA star symbol, a PCAST logo, or a specific named cut with a clear origin claim. None of this takes paranoia. It takes about 15 seconds of label reading before the steak goes into your trolley. From the grass-fed loophole to the Wagyu investigation, we've walked you through exactly where the gap sits between what brands promise and what they must prove. You are no longer the shopper the meat case can talk past with a fancy word and a gold font. You now know what PCS and MSA mean. You can walk into any store and read any steak label for the rest of your life. That knowledge beats any ranking. Knowing how to read a meat label never expires, because the underlying rules and loopholes are not going anywhere anytime soon. Go and check your own fridge or freezer. See which of these traps might be sitting quietly on your shelf. Then come back to the comments and tell me which trap shocked you the most, or if you think macro or MSA deserves the top spot. Next time you're standing in that meat aisle and a label tries to sell you a story instead of a steak, you will know exactly what you're looking at. That's not just knowledge, that's power. And unlike a supermarket promise, this kind of power doesn't expire the next time the packaging gets a redesign. So take it with you, use it every week, and never let a sticker sell you a story again.